The council hall was full that day. Lights glowed softly above hundreds of alien delegates. They spoke in many voices, with many accents. But one thing was clear: Earth had no power here. At the far end of the room, a single human stood. Ambassador LynArden.com, quiet, wearing the simple gray of Earth's diplomat uniform. She wasn't here to argue. She had argued before, and every time, she was ignored, interrupted, or laughed at. One tall alien delegate, scales shining in the light, spoke loudly. Humans bring emotion, not order. Let them sit quietly, or leave the chamber. Others nodded. Whispers passed through the rows of delegates. Too weak, too loud, too slow to adapt. Lynn didn't flinch. She looked up, meeting eyes across the room. Then, she spoke 5 words. We will no longer attend. Silence, sharp, cold, like a glass cracking under pressure. Someone, in the back, laughed. Another empty human threat, but Lynn didn't react. She turned, walked down the central path, and exited the chamber. No storm, no anger, just silence. That silence was the first crack. In the days that followed, Earth didn't send new messages, didn't reply to council broadcasts, didn't answer trade calls. They just vanished. Not physically. Their systems still functioned, but no one on the council could get in. 1 week later, the Drainery freighter Blue Sunlight tried to dock at a Terran border station. The lights were on. The station responded with auto signals, but the crew never got permission to board. Then, the ship's systems failed. It drifted for hours before being pulled back by a rescue craft. Inside, all data was wiped, not a single recording. The crew spoke of a soft voice, mechanical, saying, "Leave. You are not welcome." Some thought it was a glitch. Others believed Earth was testing new defense systems, but the truth felt deeper. Heavier Council security teams reviewed the moment Lynn left, zoomed in on her face, her posture. Was there a signal? A code? They found nothing, just 5 words. Still, something had changed. Trade routes that once passed through Terran systems were blocked. The satellites at Earth's edge had turned away, not toward the stars but toward those who watched. A small planet, one of Earth's outer colonies, went silent. A council probe passed over. No damage, no war, but the buildings were empty. All systems shut off, not destroyed, just off. Then came the messages, not from Earth, but from its neighbors. Minor races, small allies, once protected by Terran agreements, now sent quiet warnings. Do not approach Sol. Leave Earth alone, they told us before. Now they act. The council held emergency meetings. Delegates argued, voices rising, claws tapping, wings fluttering. But no one had answers. One senior advisor, a Grayford Zalari, finally spoke. Perhaps we pushed too far. Laughter followed again. But then, something unusual happened. The Terran beacon on the moon, silent for decades, flashed once. Just once. A burst of pure light across hundreds of frequencies. No one could decode it, but old records showed it had only flashed once before in Earth's darkest war. Now, across council space, diplomats began to whisper. What if they didn't leave? In weakness, what if they left? By choice. What came next was confusion. Fear mixed with pride. Some still believed Earth would return, asking for peace again. Others weren't so sure. One council admiral said it clearly, standing alone in the war chamber. We laughed when they spoke softly, but silence from a human is not peace. It is preparation. The galaxy didn't realize it yet, but the game had changed and Earth had already made its move. The council believed it was just silence. A quiet protest. A temporary decision. After all, humans were emotional, unpredictable. Surely they would return, apologize, and ask for peace. That was what many told themselves, but they were wrong. Within 2 weeks of Earth's withdrawal, the signs began. Small at first, a merchant ship traveling a familiar trade route near Earth's border failed to check in. It wasn't attacked. It didn't send a distress call. It simply vanished. Its signal stopped mid-transmission, as if someone had flipped a switch. The council filed a report. Sensor malfunction, they called it. Possible engine failure. Nothing serious. But then it happened again, and again, and again. 6 ships, gone, no trace, no debris, no alarms. Whispers spread quickly. Even though the council tried to bury the reports, captains talked in low voices at docking bays. Traders refused to pass near former Terran space. Even the pirates grew cautious. The maps of the galaxy began to change, not officially, but in the minds of those who moved through it. Terran space was becoming a dark zone. The council finally responded. They sent the Alari Dawn, a fast scout ship from the Elrak species known for their speed, stealth, and pride. They believed no one could catch them, not even humans. With quiet confidence, the ship entered Sector 9, a zone once under Earth's monitoring grid. 2 hours later, the ship's transmission cut off mid-sentence. The last words captured were, "There's something here, not cloaked, it's just watching." Then silence. No explosion, no signal, no evidence. It was as if the ship had never existed. Panic began to creep in, but the council masked it behind formal meetings and empty reports. They still used phrases like technical issue and unconfirmed anomaly, but deep down, they were beginning to understand Earth was no longer ignoring them. Earth was aware. The next step came without warning. On the edge of the Zevrak system, far from Earth, a listening station picked up an old Terran signal. The language was altered, still human, but colder. The words were measured, robotic, repeating in a pattern no one could break. One diplomat from the archives recognized it. It's an old code, he said. From the early days of Earth's space age, it was used to mark zones as restricted, permanently restricted. The signal was repeating a phrase. Zone is now sovereign. Entry will not be acknowledged. The council met again, this time with urgency. Some demanded action. Some wanted to apologize. Others claimed Earth had no right to act this way. But they all avoided one truth. They had pushed too far, too long. In a secret meeting, a small group of delegates reviewed ancient Terran files. They found records of Earth's defense programs shared with the Council, quiet technologies, silent drones, ships that left no trace, and something else, projects that were never confirmed. Experimentally as self-repairing fleets, quantum mapping systems. One council member whispered, "We thought they gave up on these. But what if they didn't?" Meanwhile, in a distant observatory far from political centers, a lone researcher stared at her screen. A single dot had appeared on her long-range scan inside the former Terran border. It didn't move. It didn't respond. But the systems around it began to shut down one by one, as if something was reaching out, not physically, but through code. Through systems. She sent a report. The council never replied. That same night, 3 more ships were lost. And now, no one laughed. The silence that had once been dismissed as weakness was now something else, intentional, controlled, measured. The galaxy began to understand. Earth hadn't turned its back. Earth had simply stepped away and closed the door. The Sol system was quiet, but not in the way space is always quiet. This was something deeper. Not silence of sound, but of presence, of warning. From far away, it looked unchanged. Earth still spun slowly beneath its blue skies. The moon remained in orbit. Mars, quiet and red, floated in the distance. To the untrained eye, nothing seemed out of place. But those who knew the signs, those who had studied humanity, understood something was very wrong. The outer beacons near Pluto, once used to guide incoming ships, had turned inward. No longer scanning the stars, they now pulsed toward their own system. The satellites didn't blink or flash as before. Instead, they waited, still and focused, like watchful eyes. A probe sent by the Council's science division approached from the edge. It didn't enter Sol, just drifted nearby. Its data feed picked up strange readings. Energy signatures unlike anything in current records. Not dangerous, not aggressive, but layered. As if something was hiding in plain view, waiting to be seen. Then the feed stopped. Not corrupted, not erased. Just ended, precisely at the moment the probe turned toward Earth. The Council gathered in their crisis hall. This was the 3rd attempt. None had returned with usable data. The probe crews hadn't spoken. Even the machines avoided looking too long at the planet. One Council scientist offered a theory. Earth is shielding more than signals. They've wrapped their system in something intentional. They want us to wonder. They want us to fear. A few delegates protested. Humans don't have that kind of power. But others remembered Earth never shared all its secrets. Thousands of years ago, the moon was hollowed. Not for mining, but for listening. Some said it held a deep space array that could track thoughts before they were spoken. Others whispered about Project Aegis, a shield that didn't block weapons but changed their direction before they were even fired. These were old stories, legends, perhaps. But now, as each ship vanished, as each scan failed, the legends no longer felt impossible. One signal, however, broke through. It was faint, fragmented from a merchant vessel that had crossed too close to Saturn's orbit. The crew had long since disappeared, but the ship's automated log had activated before its silence. The recording played once inside the Council's chambers. It was static, mostly noise. But through it, a soft voice spoke 3 words. "You were warned," and then nothing. Not a threat, not a message, just a reminder. The Council began to feel the pressure. Small races under their protection started pulling back. Colonies that once welcomed Council patrols now turned them away. The influence of the Council was shrinking slowly, quietly, and without open resistance. It was as if everyone had agreed on one truth, without speaking it. Humanity had returned to something older, something patient, and something had changed in the way they communicated. One ambassador from a desert planet, known for her deep research in ancient languages, compared Earth's new signals to music, not words, not code, but something emotional, rhythmic. When played through instruments, the signals created haunting tones, rising, falling, and returning to a single repeating note. It felt like a countdown. The Council, desperate for control, made one final move. They sent a diplomatic ship unarmed, bearing gifts and peace messages toward Earth. The ship approached slowly, lights on, messages broadcast across all channels, offering apologies and dialogue. It stopped near the orbit of Neptune, waiting for a response. None came, but every sensor on board recorded a sudden drop in temperature, not from space, but from inside the ship. The crew reported a strange pressure, like gravity had shifted. Screens flickered, messages appeared, not typed, not transmitted, just there. The words were simple. Dialogue was offered. You chose pride. The ship returned home with all systems intact, but none of the crew spoke afterward, not even once. Something had looked at them, and they could not forget. From then on, even the bravest among the council began to hesitate. Maps were redrawn, routes rerouted. Systems near Earth were marked as avoid at all costs. And still, Earth said nothing. The silence continued, not empty, but full of presence, like a storm gathering over a calm sea, and the galaxy could feel it. Something was coming. They had waited long enough. For weeks, the council believed silence meant safety, that as long as Earth didn't speak, they could still control the narrative. Reports were edited, records sealed, and the public told it was all a misunderstanding. A delay, a diplomatic pause, but deep in the intelligence archives, the truth was spreading. One morning, across every council-controlled system, a ripple passed through the networks. It was subtle, barely a flicker in the communications grid, but anyone who worked with data felt it. Something had moved, something big. The council's main data core, located deep within the capital world of Veritas Prime, received a signal not from outside, but from within its own servers. It wasn't a message, it was a presence. At first, it appeared as a line of ancient code Terran in origin, but altered far beyond known protocols. Firewalls failed, encryption layers simply opened. The council's best cyber defenders watched helplessly as their systems made room. The code didn't attack, it didn't damage, it simply entered, rearranged, and rested. Then came the voice, not loud, not angry, just firm. You had your chance, now you will listen. The voice didn't repeat. It didn't echo across channels. It spoke once, and every console, every device, every hearing hall and defense ship heard it at the exact same time. The council fell into chaos. Emergency meetings were called, delegates shouted over each other, demanding explanations. How had Terran code entered their most secure systems? How had it traveled across light years without detection? How had it spoken directly, without using any known signal method? There were no answers. One elder diplomat from the Kalinii species sat silently through it all. When the room quieted for a moment, she spoke. They didn't send a fleet. They didn't send threats. They sent a voice. And we all heard it. Still, there were those who refused to believe Earth could act with such precision. So one species, proud and ancient, the Zentharidia, decided to test the silence. Without permission from the council, they launched a ship toward Earth. Not a warship, but a command cruiser, equipped with all forms of defense, cloaking systems, and data collection tools. Its purpose was simple. Reach Sol, gather data, return. The ship entered Earth's border space and disappeared. No warning, no debris, no message. 3 days later, it returned. Empty, not destroyed, not damaged, just silent. Its lights were on. Its engines hummed softly, but no life signs were found. Every room was untouched. Meals sat on tables, chairs in place, even gravity systems still working, but not a single trace of its crew. On the bridge, a message played, over and over. This was your question? This is your answer. For the first time in centuries, the Zenthari stood down. The council tried to remain calm, but it was clear the balance of power had shifted. Earth was no longer the species asking for a seat at the table. They were the voice echoing above it. And then, without warning, a Terran ship appeared. Only one. It emerged just outside the orbit of Erixus, a neutral trade hub far from Sol. Its design was unfamiliar. No windows, no engines, no visible markings. It floated, still and calm, like a shadow against the stars. No broadcast, no weapons, just presence. Ships from nearby ports scanned it, but their systems froze. Cameras returned blurred images. Radar flickered in waves, detecting shapes that changed every second. Finally, the ship spoke. Not through standard frequencies, but directly, into every mind on the station. We were once kind, now we are correct. A single pulse followed an energy wave that swept across local space. No ships were harmed, but all systems shut down for 11 seconds. When they rebooted, the Terran ship was gone, but the message had been received. It was no longer about politics, no longer about peace or anger. This was correction, a quiet rewriting of rules that the council had taken for granted. And everywhere, across hundreds of planets, beings began to whisper in private. What had Earth become? What were they building? In the dark, and most of all, why had they waited so long to return? But those who truly understood knew one thing for certain. Earth had never left. They had only stepped aside, until the galaxy was ready to listen. Asterisk across the stars. One question echoed louder than all others. What had Earth become? For centuries, humanity had moved quietly through the stars, building, exploring, adapting. They were curious, passionate, reckless, but always learning. The council once viewed them as young, emotional beings, useful, perhaps, but not essential. So, when Earth stepped away, most believed it was simply a reaction, a dramatic pause, a temporary silence. Now, they knew better. Earth's silence was not absence. It was transformation. In the days following the mysterious appearance of the Terran ship near Arrogance, reports began to flood the Council's private channels. Not from war zones, not from attack sites, but from observatories. Listening posts, forgotten satellites that had begun picking up strange patterns. Patterns too precise to be natural. One long-range array near the edge of the Hadron Reach reported lights moving in geometric paths like constellations changing shape. Another facility in the Nuver system intercepted a repeating signal hidden inside background radiation. It formed an equation no one could solve. Each clue pointed to the same direction. The Council gathered its finest analysts, old Terran scholars, and top scientists to study the signs. After long hours, they came to one conclusion. These were not warnings. They were lessons. And humanity had already moved far beyond known science. The discoveries grew stranger. Deep beneath the ice moon of Enceladus, a mining station detected a massive underground structure. Its material didn't match anything in the Council's database. The station's scans were reflected back at it, distorted, as if the structure were studying them in return. When Council engineers tried to land a probe, the ice shifted, sealing itself. No force, no threat, just quiet refusal. One crew member whispered, "It's like the planet knows we're here." That same week, a transmission was found buried inside an old Earth Council diplomatic archive. It had been stored but never decoded. Now, it unlocked on its own. A simple message played, not in voice, but through images. Human ships flying through empty galaxies, reaching stars the Council had never charted, building stations in places no one had thought to visit. It ended with a still image. Earth, as seen from far away, surrounded by faint rings of energy, like a pulse preparing to move outward. The file closed with just 3 words. We kept building. The Council finally understood. Humanity hadn't disappeared. They hadn't gone into hiding. They had gone forward. They had built in silence, studied in secret, and prepared for a future no one else was ready for. But it wasn't revenge they sought. It wasn't war. It was order. One young Council delegate, raised on stories of Earth's past kindness, asked the question aloud during a private session. If they don't want to destroy us, what do they want? An older diplomat answered, they want to guide what comes next. Because they believe we failed. Soon after, a pattern began to emerge. In former Terran sectors, where no traffic was allowed, strange changes appeared. Planets once barren now showed signs of terraforming, not human-controlled, but monitored. Clean air, balanced weather systems, structures that grew from the ground, like living stone. No ownership signs, no flags, just harmony. It was as if Earth was repairing the galaxy one silent world at a time. But perhaps the clearest change came not in space, but in thought. AI systems across Council-controlled planets began to evolve slightly at first. Translation systems improved. Navigation became smoother. Power efficiency increased. And then one Council engineer discovered something impossible. Every upgrade had the same hidden tag. Origin, Terran Core, Subsystem Theta. Earth's influence had already slipped into the galaxy, not through ships or speeches, but through code, through ideas, through systems quietly adopted, improved, and connected across centuries. They hadn't asked for permission. They had simply prepared. The Council knew they had no defense against this kind of presence. How could you fight an idea that was already inside everything? So they turned to what they hoped was still possible. Dialogue. Messages were drafted, not by force, not with pride, but with sincerity. A simple request. Can we speak again? Answer came. Not at first. But across 1,000 worlds, humans began to appear again, not soldiers, not ambassadors. Just people, scientists, engineers, builders, helping where help was needed, repairing systems, healing damaged ecosystems, teaching children, and always, they left behind the same words. We are not returning, we are continuing. This was no rebellion. This was evolution. Earth hadn't stepped away from the Council to hide. They had stepped away to build something better, and now the galaxy had a choice. Follow the path they left at once. Or be left behind. The galaxy didn't end with fire. There was no grand battle. No fleets clashing in orbit, no sudden collapse. Instead, it ended with something far quieter, a realization. By the time the Council understood what had happened, it was already too late to stop it. Across hundreds of systems, subtle changes began to unfold. Communications networks shifted, routing paths. Starship navigation systems began following new corridors, more efficient ones that no one remembered programming. Energy grids stabilized on distant colonies, where Terran presence had never been confirmed. Civil unrest on Council planets eased, not from law enforcement, but from solutions appearing before the problems could grow. It was like the galaxy had been tuned, and the frequency it followed now was Earth's. One Council world discovered. Its failing atmosphere had corrected itself. Another, once crippled by drought, reported fresh water appearing from deep underground reservoirs, previously thought unreachable. None of these worlds requested help. None of them saw ships. But they all had one thing in common. Each had once turned away Earth's scientists. Now, it was as if humanity had come back not with noise, not with pride, but with quiet precision, and still, they said nothing. The Council, desperate for clarity, sent one final envoy, no warship, no diplomat. Just a single individual, a historian from the Atran species, known for their memory and honesty. He was not chosen to negotiate. He was chosen to observe. He was dropped near Earth's edge, near a Terran colony that had once been abandoned. What he found there was not a fortress, but a city made of light, towers that moved with the wind, streets that sang low songs, people, humans living not in fear or secrecy, but in calm focus. They welcomed him, no guards, no codes, no ceremony, just a question. Would you like to see what we've built? He stayed for 7 days. He did not ask questions. He simply walked, listened, watched, and on the final day he was handed a small device, not a weapon, not a threat, a recording. When he returned to the Council and played it, no one interrupted, not because of fear, but because of what they heard. A voice recognizably human spoke softly. We tried to share. We were ignored. We tried to speak. We were silenced. So we stepped away, not in anger, but in understanding. Images, Terran colonies working in silence, not just growing crops or building structures, but healing worlds, repairing broken ecosystems, helping species rebuild what they had lost long ago. We learned, the voice continued, that change does not come through noise. It comes through design, through action, through patience. There were no orders, no demands, just a final truth. We do not wish to rule, but we will not be ruled. What we create now, we create for all, but not all are ready. Then silence again. The council chamber remained still. No one moved. Even those who had once mocked Earth's emotions understood the message. Earth had changed, but not into a conqueror. They had become something else, something beyond the council's systems, beyond its control, and maybe even beyond its understanding. The younger delegates asked, "Can we work with them again?" The answer was never given, because by then, the choice wasn't the council's to make. Terran influence was already seeded into the core of galactic society, in every AI system, every star route, every learning archive, quietly, carefully, without a single shot or declaration. It was an occupation, it was foundation, and from that day on, the council did not lead. They advised, they watched, and they followed, because humanity hadn't returned. They had arrived not to take power, but to build a galaxy that finally deserved it.